All right, so welcome. I'm Karen Pearson. I chair the sustainability effort here at FIT. I also happen to sit as a knowledge partner on the WoTO group. So today we're actually going to speak about the WoTO group. We're going to talk about how it was formed and the power that partnerships and collaborations can really have within the industries as we're moving towards change within our supply chain. As many of you will know, this group was really a part of an expansion of Borre's effort from ByBorre to really rethink and reimagine the supply chain and all components of it as it relates to both the design and textile industry. In that space, he'll talk about really how he came up with that concept when he joins us and how that has really led to that. But I thought, to make sure we save time for that kind of rich discussion and also kind of casual conversation and questions from our panelists, while they were finishing up their prior session and conversation, I really wanted to take this opportunity to welcome all of you. Hope that you've been able to attend many of our other sessions. For those of you who aren't aware, these sessions following the event will be available via the conference links through Earth Day. So please come back, join, take an opportunity to listen and learn from all these really powerful conversations about the promise and opportunity that collaborations and cross-intersectional points are having to create and reimagine the future. So that is clearly enough about me personally, but I am joined here with three of the other WoTO partners. And so Ho, can I have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company, where you come from, what work you do here? Because you really, DuPont is a name that we'll recognize here in New York, but make sure our whole audience kind of understands where you're sitting in that space. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Hao speaking, and I'm working as a business manager for DuPont Biomaterials business unit, cover the EMEA region. So as many of you already know, DuPont, more than 200 years, companies invent a lot of famous product for textile applications. So as a DuPont Biomaterials, we are relatively new or young in the DuPont family. And our mission actually is to bring world-class science to the global market and focus on partnership with the forward thinkers to advance the bioeconomy. So that's actually one of the main reasons why we joined the WoTO team, and we're also looking forward to more collaborations there and push the boundaries and to make the let's say the fashion or textile industry more sustainable. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Michael.
Yes, with pleasure. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening to the ones in Europe, and good afternoon to the ones in the US. So my name is Michel Mastio. I'm working for company Südwolle Group. I'm the global segment director for all the sales of our yarns. We are selling yarn in merino wool for hosiery, circular knitting, and also for seamless. So we have joined we know ByBorre quite a long time as a customer, but we also joined the WoTO team, let's say, roughly 1.5 years ago. So I think we might talk about this a little later. Maybe a few words on our company. We are a German-based company, headquarters in Germany, but we have global, let's say, production facilities in Asia and in Europe, and specialize on marine yarns out of merino wool and merino wool blends. So I'm quite sure if you're living in the US, some of our products will be around somewhere in the shops with some very well-known brands. Thank you.
All right, Roberto.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roberto. I work in Südweb's department, that is the innovation department of Südweb's. And it's really a pleasure be part of WoTO space, because for us that we work in innovation, share the knowledge which the partner that are specialized means reduce trial in the research. This consequence is reduce the impact of CO2 in the environment. This is for me, really a big opportunity to be part of this space. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. I think all of us can really kind of attest to the power that being in these kind of group discussions have as we start to think and reimagine how we contribute to really, I'm going to say, changing carbon footprint, reimagining the supply chain. And I think part of it is, as you know, I didn't script a number of specific questions because I wanted to keep it open to share how you felt that kind of the conversations we have within the WoTO group and the discussion about how we look at that idea of innovation and change and how we're using that to kind of create new design and new methodologies and really celebrating all parts of the supply chain. So I'd really love to start to talk just a little bit about that intersectional point of kind of innovation and change within the supply chain. So who would like to start first that's there? I see Hao. Oh, no. I'm saying your name wrong. Is it Hao or Ho?
Hao. It's just
Hao.
like
Thank you. I apologize.
no, it's fine. I think first thing we should realize that we cannot do the things by ourselves because, I mean, in the apparels or the textile industries, we have a lot of challenges and which to overcome or to develop the solutions to really solve the problems. And either it's a performance challenging or it's a sustainability challenging, we really need to work together. And what's really impressed me or what the WoTO can do is it's offer really, let's say, open and a transparent platform. And also it connect all the dots like actually you can see all the key stakeholders within the textile supply chain is really join the WoTO family. And then we have regularly discussions and like share the ideas, try to inspire each other. And then such kind of collaborations is really initiated just during this kind of conversation, the open and transparent conversation. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Roberto, let me pass it to you. And then after we go kind of through this one, we'll pick you right up at the end. Okay, Borre?
Yeah. Yes, as I say before, it is important to share the knowledge. We are in the era of sharing. Means that there is not a secret. We have to be open source because this means for us reduce time, reduce energy, and specialize ourselves in things to be really better and create our supply chain in textile is complex. We have to work to simplify this. The only way to simplify is share, to be transparent. And this for sure will have an impact on the environment. And also in a way, if we life, I think that this is a great project. I want to say thank you to create this opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you. Michael.
Now I hope I can be heard. Yes, I think we have a saying in our company. We have to make the things different. We have a saying: think out of the box, do the things in a different way. Trying to innovate, try to make the things more sustainable, more eco-friendly. Let's say, trying to come up with new ideas, and that I think that is what WoTO is standing for. I mean, we have a corporation of great partners who are all market leaders in different fields. And combining those knowledge, let's say, and making projects together, let's say, is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, a lot of great things can be developed there, and that is what we see today. Trying to do the things in a different way, try to do the things newer, also in accordance, let's say to the environment, like for example the CO2, which is a very, very important part. And I think we are only at the beginning. I think there's a lot more to come, let's say, in the coming years. And I think we are only at the start. And so I'm looking forward to this cooperation going further and making a lot of crazy and innovative things going forward.
Well, I love hearing from all of you to talk about this. I really love that you described WoTO as a family and as a collaborative, as an innovation hub that was really looking at addressing principles of circularity, the supply chain, and really looking at how do we do some of this within this space collaboratively that also in the end really also impacts, how do I want to say, the sustainable development goals at all levels. So I think that's really great. And I'm so pleased at this point for this conversation to introduce you to Borre. And so we've been talking a little bit about the power of collaboration and innovation within the WoTO space and how it's providing us a platform to have these conversations. But we would love to have you talk a little bit about how you imagined it and what you envisioned, at least as the start of its pathway forward and growth.
Thanks. First of all, apologies. I couldn't get into the call, so my apologies for that. I was struggling. Building the sort of the one of most innovative places on textile doesn't mean I understand WebEx always. But no, I think it's definitely, yeah, I think how also the partners before were describing it. For me, in the beginning, it was such a search throughout the supply chain to just get my foot into to the door as a creator, and where I believe, like in the end, creators are sort of the gatekeepers of doing better. So doesn't matter if they work in very big companies or in small companies, or like they're the ones to give shape to everything around us. If it's an architect, or if it's a fashion designer, or if it's a product designer that made the glasses around you, they decide on what product are we going to make? What shape are we going to give it? What material are we going to make it? What color is that going to be? So also what production processes. And being a young creator and then trying to do better and trying to get your foot into the door and literally get the door slammed in your face, not because of bad intentions, but like, well, you don't have volume, or sorry, we don't have time, or well, there's nothing behind it yet. But how, and it took me almost 15 years to get to the point where you are working for big companies and you are the consultant and there is volume behind it. And then you look back and you see everybody struggling. And for me, that was so weird. So when we started showcasing what we did, and we already had a more open source thought, and I always said, like, I am not doing this alone. I'm not making the yarns. I don't have the machines. I don't make the machines. These are the trailblazers in yarn world. These are the trailblazers in machine world, and the dialogues between us all will give and make a change. And I could only sort of see myself as a young creator, sort of thinking, like, if I had that access from the beginning, how would have I designed then? And all the conversations I had with big brands, I was thinking, if all these creators had the access to the best yarn suppliers that we know, to better productions, to an open, transparent supply chain, so that you can find your closest factory and not a factory that you have a relationship with on the other side of the world. So to really start thinking about where can we all save, and also then tell an honest and transparent story with also failing in between. Like, this is not working. I'm failing here. Who can help me? And that is a bit what WoTO became. It became that spot where you don't have to have all the knowledge, but it became that spot where all the parts of the supply chain were shown and said, this is the step. You begin with your raw materials and you end with your product. And all the steps in between, you have to ask questions and you need help. Who can help you with it? And suddenly where all the partners started adding to it, but also the biggest competitors that literally put their hands together and say, like, hey, how can we work to new solutions? How can we sort of give access to not only one brand, one of the biggest sportswear brands in the world, and then let them claim everything, but how can we actually give access to everybody and make quantity of like all those brands have a bigger quantity and actually have more impact? And think about like, hey, how can we educate these creators to do less but better? And that was sort of the start, and now the very exciting place that WoTO is becoming, and also is for all our partners. And yeah, every time I walk in every week, there's at least one round table session of a partner or clients that I had no clue of what they were working on, and then I see what comes out, and I'm inspired myself. So it's yeah, it's one of the best things that happened to us, and it was just to be open and curious and well, yeah, a sharing mindset. I think that was the start.
I think those are all really good points. I think the idea of curiosity and creating that kind of platform for collaboration is so important. I also think it's a really interesting component to think about the fact that, our supply chain had become or is very, very global, and in many cases, it's not always so connected. And, as we talk about carbon footprint and the impact of different products, we look at some things in the sense of scale in terms of size of production, but also where you're producing it matters as to where in the end it's going to be produced into the next steps in its component. Is one, there are any number of things, but we see any number of notes to say, look, if it can be produced closer to its next step, it's right away not having such a carbon input. So it seems to me a lot of this work is also about having it be open and transparent, so we can have manufacturing and supply hubs in different locations. Maybe we're not only seeing them in one area, a little bit globally. Would any of you like to think a little bit more, or talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I would love to immediately jump in, but I see that Hao was first. Go for it.
Well, I think, to me, the WoTO really provide a kind of one-stop shop kind of concept, because I know that when I talk with many brands, I think the problem is that there are just so many sustainable solutions available in the market. But as a designer or as a creator, probably you have a trouble to really get access to all this kind of advanced technologies. But WoTO really tried the best to put all this kind of advanced technologies and together. And it's more like to provide a kind of, let's say, the toolkit to the designer and creators for them to actually choose, okay, if we want to solve these issues, maybe these are the kind of technology providers or suppliers can help us to do that. So these kind of, I would say, really make first the communication channel much shorter, but on the other hand, also it solve kind of the miscommunications within the current supply chains. So that's a really kind of step change to me. It's really, yeah, valuable.
Nice. I truly, what you said, Karen, and thanks, Hao. I think it is only transparency. Sort of, if we know where everything is, we can make it more efficient. And at this point, everybody is protecting that little bit of knowledge or their own network. Even when I was asking some of my best friends that had brands, I was like, hey, I need a factory. They were like, well, this is ours. And I was like, yo, we're friends, right? And they were like, yeah, but this is our lifeline. And I truly believe that it is weird to sort of have an infrastructure to protect. I think if we want to do better as a world, we need to be more efficient. Brands can be more efficient and companies try to also be more efficient, but why can we not be more efficient in the world? We only have so much resources. Where do those resources come from? And if there would be full transparency on the supply chain, also we can talk about legislation, because then companies of governments can start saying like, well, okay, we want a big percentage only to come from 100 kilometers or miles, and make sure that everything only comes by train or by bus. We don't want anything to be flown in. What is actually growing here, and how much can we grow? Can we cap the amount of resources that are used? Because if you look at what we have used in the last 50 years, it is more than is coming back and growing back. We're exploiting and emptying out the world. So we cannot go on like this. So for me, that transparency, that understanding where everything is, becoming more efficient, making sure that we cap things, and making sure that we really think about legislation, and thinking about what grows where and what can we use where, can be super interesting also for future thinkers and creators to use local materials but at scale, because they grow there and they will grow back.
I couldn't agree more. Just as a quick reminder before I find out if anybody else has some thoughts that they'd like to share here, I just put a reminder to our audience and our attendees, please populate the chat with your questions so I can feed them to this. All right, we have a volunteer for going next. Michael, it's all you.
Okay, so just maybe answer or giving some comments on some of the points which had been mentioned. I mean, transparency is exactly the point, let's say, which in the past a lot of brands had been difficult to with. Don't share anything, don't share where we are producing, and I think there is a change. There is a change in the world. I think people handling this more often. There is brands who are even doing transparency reports. Meanwhile, showing their whole supply, showing their producers, show everybody who is involved. And I think we would see this more and more. And then coming to another point which you have mentioned, Karen, the local for local. This is also something which we clearly see also with the very big brands. They're trying to produce step by step closer to the final consumer, just, let's say, to minimize this environmental impact by the end of the day. So that is a clear tendency which we are seeing at the moment in all parts of the world, let's say, in a big way, and not only with the small players, also with the big ones by the end of the day.
Yes, I totally agree also, because transparency allows to teach the person and to be responsible on what they are creating and they are producing. I think that is really, really important to be honest, to grow, and know what we do.
But the question, of course, is how can we also push towards that radical transparency? Because it is a nice thought, and it is interesting to see that actually, if you look at whole new financial worlds, if you're thinking about the whole crypto world, the whole digital world, there you see that there is radical transparency throughout the blockchain. Everybody knows every step. And I think that is also something that we should learn from and look at, like, hey, how can we sort of bring radical transparency? How can we sort of show every step? And that's something that we try with and do with Create, is every step along the way, every supplier is shown, every location is shown. We give that impact passport, but that is something that governments will have to pick up and say, like, well, we need to legislate this transparency. We have to ask and also say, like, well, if there is no full transparency, you cannot sell in this country, or you cannot sell within the States, Europe, Asia, or Africa, wherever, if it is not. And then you can say, like, well, we want an X percentage that is all made local for local. And I think that is going to be interesting when those conversations are there, and we start pushing that towards a point where bigger brands that have squeezed the supply chain for profit and squeezed all these steps for their own gain will have to really start opening up and start saying, like, well, this is my sell-through. Well, and if your sell-through is not high enough and your sell-through would only be 60%, why are you overproducing 40%? Like those questions should be asked, and so those questions should be also put on the table. And I think, like for me there, and I was like, one of the things of the blockchain, for instance, what I find very interesting is that if things get sold again and again, everybody shares with that sale. So even the beginning, the makers, and that is something where I think as a society we need to go through. How can we, if things are good and they're used not one time but 100 times, how can everybody share within a good product? Because then the incentive of the people that make fiber, the incentive of people that make products, is all to make better products that can be recycled, so, and that can live a longer life, because the incentive of making a better product will financially gain throughout its lifetime. And that I find super interesting on sort of that blockchain thought and sort of that transparency thought. And that is something that, yeah, I want to push from WoTO, giving that freedom and that transparency already to all the creators, but also with all the partners, sort of embrace that and show like, hey, we can do it. And we don't have to wait only for legislation, but we can already showcase it so that we can give legislation a chance to say like, hey, there it's happening. Why can we not do it all?
I think that's actually a really interesting kind of set of points also about where the responsibility lies to really kind of create or push for the change. You know, as a group here, we've all kind of committed to the importance and understanding of the pillars of sustainability. And in particular in that, I always want to remember that there's true economic sustainability within that space. So theoretically, if we really have this sustainability kind of Venn diagram correct, we are actually hitting a level that provides good economics at all components within that supply chain. So, you know, keeping it such a tight or overproduced component maybe doesn't make sense, not just environmentally, but even economically speaking. Not my area of expertise, so I shouldn't get too much into the full economics of it. Where's the consumer's responsibility in pushing for this change?
Well, if you ask me, if consumers have access to knowledge, it will become big, and they can have a lot of impact. But a lot of knowledge is held back from them, and they're being sort of tricked into it. But I'm curious what Michael thinks.
So I'm not sure if I mentioned. I mean, we are actually living in Germany, but I think we see this in other countries as well. Particularly the younger consumer, he is not simply buying a product. They're asking questions. They want to know where it's coming from. Is it ethical produced? So what is all about? And they are simply, so it has to come from the consumer. The demand has to come from there, and it is coming. I think we still have to deal with the older generation who don't care about this, you know, and I think it might be difficult to change this. But from the younger side, we see a lot of requests like that. And we also have a lot of customers who are showing the full transparency, the full supply chain from the beginning, with sharing all the raw materials were inside up to the end by the end of the day. And there is definitely a move in this direction, but there is still truly a way to go, let's say, to make this workable by the end of the day for the whole.
Well, I do see younger consumers asking, but the thing is that there's, I think, a lot of goodwill, brands are telling stories about parts of their supply chain that they do well. And even that they try very well, that becomes greenwashing. And so, and it's impossible for consumers to dive into the process if all the doors are closed. So I do foresee a sort of a very big responsibility at the creators. And because the creators are at that point where they can ask suppliers to open doors. They can even say like, well, if you don't open doors, then we don't work with you. That's what we do too. So I do see that creators, very young till old, like that whole all these generation of creators, we need to educate and push to do less and better, and to really start talking about a sort of sustainability, but also with then the biggest part that the end consumers can do is start talking about their usage. If they openly start talking about usage, then we can really talk about sustainability, because then we have transparency on how products are used or how they are not used. So there, I think, is the balance a bit for me.
So the balance is really between both how the product is used, and how it's created and what it's made out of. And you know, earlier in one of my conversations this morning, we spent a long time actually talking about kind of the storytelling importance in sustainability and the importance of the consumer understanding, for example, where a garment came from. This is something that came up in a number of my conversations over the last 2 days, but about where designers, especially those who are doing kind of unique single example garments, are really creating hang tags that keep this entire story. So as part of this, maybe as a designer, we can say, look, we're going to publish the whole story of our garment on the hang tag. And by doing that, all of a sudden, there's a much greater level of accountability within the production side of the supply chain. I see some nodding in agreement from Roberto and Hao. Would you guys like to offer some thoughts? I know Borre has any number of thoughts on that.
Well, first, I just want to echo that we really observe the big wave from more consumer levels, the awareness of the sustainable solutions. And also, you know, for example, there's many consumers go for the fair trade label, the products. This is a really good example to show that. But on the other hand, I also see or can really confirm that from consumer levels, the lack of the knowledge, even though there's a lot of stories out there, but for the consumer to choose the right ones, it's really struggling. I think in that case, maybe it's back to, let's say, the more collaboration levels, but it's not within the industry anymore. Then we need to have the government and who actually can bring in the regulations or the labelings to make the products actually to really like certified or qualified, how you call it, to make it for the consumers to be easy to make the decision. I think this is probably the next step that we should do, is really like collaborate in even bigger scales and to fight for the same goal in that case. Yeah.
Thank you. Roberto.
Yes, for sure. As I say, ByBorre, for me, it's important starting with an internal policy. They say, if you want to work with me, you have to respect a certain rule, because it's a simple, sometimes create certification, but sometimes it's only paper. It's important really start and work and stop, close the door if somebody doesn't work with the right rules, with the right value. I think that this is the first step before waiting from the government.
All right, Borre, I'm going to give you a second quickly to respond to that, and then I have one more last rapid fire question as we're running out of time.
Thanks. Yeah, what I like, I think one of the most things is, in the end, like, we cannot keep on producing how we are producing. So like, we can tell transparent stories, we can tell everything where it came from. It's like, but in the end, we're producing, what was it, 100 billion garments per year, and that's not what we need on this planet. So I think, yes, transparent stories, because then we can start pointing out where the overproduction is, and we need to do less but better, and things that last longer. And that is something that I think is a mindset change. How can you make sure that garments, and I used to travel a lot to Japan, at the moment not, but like, for me, it's like, my garments, like, of course I test a lot of garments, but when you repair them, it is part of the life. You put energy into it. Like, and I think that is also like, how do you treat your garments, and how do you know the story of your garments? How do you have a lifetime with your garments? And it doesn't, lifetime doesn't mean like your whole life, but like the lifetime of the garment is, here it broke, but I fixed it. And that was, you put that energy in. And I think that thought of wabi sabi, living together with your products, knowing what your favorite products are, but having a story with everything. Every material should be as respected as the gold ring of your grandparents that everybody keeps. But if you ask them, do you keep your clothing of your grandparents or all the furniture? And they say like, no, that we threw away. But those are also raw materials that are valuable. And I think there's a sort of a learning also for end consumers. How can I do less but better, and start caring about each piece and make every piece your favorite piece?
All right, I love it. Now, we're going to have one more rapid fire type question that I'm going to pass to everybody and give them an opportunity to speak to. Borre, I'm going to have you go last in this group. So, if there's one thing that comes from the kind of collaboration and knowledge sharing that WoTO has given all of us, this opportunity to have open dialogue, to share and be innovative and collaborative and kind of think without some of the traditional silos or boundaries, what is the most powerful thing we can do to have more of those conversations and have them have the biggest impact on how we rethink and reimagine the supply chain? How would you like to start with that?
That's actually a pretty big question. So I think that there are two parts where I think we both already touched. The one is the way to communicate. I mean, to be open and to be transparent. And then also, I would really emphasize to actively talk with your peers, with your partners, even with your competitors, because in the most case, the problem, the issues probably is a common ones that you really need to work together to overcome, to solve it. So I think, yeah, these two parts is pretty important for me, or to make a big impact. Yeah.
Thank you. Michael.
Yes, so what Hao also already said, I mean, transparency and partnership, what we talked, I mean, in the whole meeting here, I think that is what is important. And it's not thinking in a silo, thinking in a network, thinking in a global network, making the things transparent, share challenges, but share also things you have done in a good way, and share them to make this even bigger. I think that is quite important. Maybe to give you one example, just from business. We have a customer in the US, and they are doing shoes, and they have a special sole which is used, and they are sharing those with their competitors. Why? They want this to become something, because it's very sustainable, become bigger, but want to become a success. And I see this a little bit in a similar way what we're doing here in the WoTO, trying to create success together and talk about it and share what we have achieved. Let's say that everybody can benefit from it, and don't be, oh, this is my competition, oh, I have to keep this, I cannot tell anything. No, I think that's the wrong way.
Roberto.
Yeah, yes, it's the same for me. The important thing is to create a really transparency in our know-how, because all of us is specialized in something. We cannot know everything in the world. We have to be honest, humility with ourselves, say, I'm specialized in this, but I would like to achieve this goal. Can you help me? And share information. Stop collaboration is the most important thing. Sharing.
All right, Borre.
Yeah, I find it very difficult. Like, I agree, of course, with the partners, that we need to be open. And I think sort of it was a nice statement of Elon Musk throwing all his, like back in the days, like throwing all his IPs out in the open on creating batteries and electric cars, and also saying like, why would you do it? It's like, well, if somebody can do it better than me, let's let's do it. Let's speed this up. And but I think also that there needs to be a realization that eternal growth is sort of impossible. And as sort of, we cannot say that we have to make less impact, but need to make more product. So where does value come from? And how is value stated? And how can we, as especially when companies become bigger and say they all have investments, how can we also think about like, hey, what do the returns need to be? And is the return also a part of changing society and giving things back again? Can we actually own things as a human being when you think about it, when you're dying in the end, but you own so much raw materials? Like, at what point is it still sort of course you can use anything in your lifetime, but until what point is owing and trying to grow and grow and grow still healthy and needed for every human being? So I really think there is also a reset in what we need and how much greed you can have. Success.
I was going to say, I think you're talking here about a shift in the value proposition for that. And I think that's something that we've really all been touching on throughout this. We actually have one question from our audience, which is really about how we could bring this industry much closer to circular fashion or circularity within the fashion industry. Does anybody want to offer any thoughts on that?
Can you repeat?
So the question is really about, how can work like that we're doing here with WoTO and how within this, what's really could bring the fashion and textile industry to a space that is more circular?
What actually, I think this has already become a kind of trend in the fashion business, and also at least I observed that the supply chain is also shifting from a linear supply chain to be a more circular ones, which actually also bring the partner together and also to strengthen the communication channels as well. So we are already doing that, but I would say what to bring it even closer. Yeah, well, I would say through the collaborations, which is actually the key topic for today, communications and all these things, and just keep doing what we are doing now. And I think that we will have a pretty good achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wanted to kind of ping in there, and then Borre, I'll pass it to you, which is I agree. I think we are making much progress here as well. So Borre?
Well, I think it's interesting to see if you also look at, for instance, the partners we have, and here Roberto is here of Südwolle. Like, it is interesting to see if your raw materials have a limit to it, because there is an X amount of sheeps, but there is also an X amount of oil, and there's an X amount of cotton, and what we can do. So, like, I think it would be very interesting is actually where do things come from, and how much is there actually, and how could we cap that? And I know that's a difficult question, especially in such a scale in the market and how quickly it's done. But it is very interesting to see like which materials grow where, and how much of that can be grown in a year. So how much can we actually use to also understand, to make it really circular? Because if there is not more that we can use and only more that comes back, you are putting an incentive for people to do it. Now there is ways like, well, there are still fibers here and there that you can use, and if there's no legislation on top of it. So I agree that we have a lot of good initiatives, but there is that mindset that we have to do less, because there is not we shouldn't clean up everybody's mess and recycle just because there is overproduction. And and that is something that we do need to flag. It is not good if you work with stock materials, because yes, you're cleaning up somebody's mess, but it's not a sort of that you're super sustainable, because it's not per definition a sustainable material. So I think we should ask more questions, and that all comes to more transparency, so that people can look at it and say like, well, thank you for cleaning up the mess, but it was a bad decision in the beginning anyway.
Wow.
Yes, I think also create a product, pure product, I don't know how to say. It's nice mix technology. We can make an example, blend together wool and Sorona. But at the end, if I have to create a circular economy, how I can recycle Sorona and wool together? I can reproduce with the same fabrics another items. But also this is important, how to blend, how to mix the different technology. We have to mix in a smart way.
Yeah. And I also think that as a designer or a creator, you should have really holistic pictures. And it's also require you to get more knowledge, even from the raw materials. But even before you starting, you already should thinking about the end of life of the raw materials, how you're going to deal with it, whether it will be biodegradable or if you want to recycle it. Because I mean, starting the design, you should already have this kind of circular kind of mindset to deeply bury into your design development process. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can speak to that from kind of the educational side of the house, which is some of our most successful pilot projects and most successful design challenges are really partnering across all the disciplines that we teach. They're not isolated in any one specific area. They're really looking at utilizing faculty and students who come from areas in art and design, business and technology, and the sciences in particular. But that's not exclusive to that. Really, the liberal arts and sciences area becomes a big component there. But we've shown a lot of good success with that. I think that's a model that can help us as we think about these problems and who we bring to the table at the early phases in the design process. One of the most recent projects I'm thinking of, I had a group of students who really talked about the importance of that. Borre, would you like to have the last words here?
Always. No, I think it is well, it for me, you have no idea how special it was. Like I remember the first call we had with WoTO, and I think it was like with several schools with from around the world, with all the machine suppliers, a ton of the yarn suppliers from all fields. And I remember like, I don't know, 30 or 40 people in there, like board members, and it was so special to see, like, especially thinking like from the point like, wow, there were so little response, and not of the partners, but if I dove into the supply chain mostly to give access. And now we come to a point that the biggest competitors and like all different silos are there to almost do the same. We did a round where everybody introduced themselves and what their goal was, and I think everybody said, well, we do this and our goal is to do less and better, and to see how we can work for a better generation. And that's interesting because it those are open words with everybody, that it is not like, hey, how can we make more profit, how can we make more. It is an intent where we are now sitting all together and we can also look at each other as like, hey, you remember that we all need to do better, and we're not here to produce only more or to like build more factories. It's like, what is the impact of that? And I think that almost the social control that we're starting to create with well, the leaders in this industry is beyond. And if we can give that spark to legislators and all creators from young to old to start to do it differently, and to ask for also our help, but also challenge us into doing better, I think that is what makes me most excited. And that's also why I'm so happy that all the students and the schools are part of this, next to all the big brands that are on the platform, because it pulls and it questions it from all sides.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a wonderful point to wrap a conversation that could clearly go on. But I think the importance of workforce development and including people who are in that workforce development phase of their kind of study and career in the collaboration and the conversations also is really important, because in the end, in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, people who are students today will be sitting as designers and in the manufacturing realm. So I think that idea and that transparency and collaboration at all levels is so important. Okay, I could talk to all of you for the entire afternoon, but I think what we really showed here in just a kind of a quick summary is the importance of collaboration and utilization of collaboration and innovation collectively to create a different pathway forward that is really much more inclusive and looks at our challenges without so much judgment. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this conversation. I want to thank again Borre, Roberto, Michael, Hao, for all joining us and being part of not just the WoTO group, but the conversation and the FIT conversation about pathways to impact. All of you have clearly stated both your own personal and your company's commitment to really changing how we're moving forward. So I'm appreciative of your time and your energy on this. And I look forward to future collaborations as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aaron, take care.
Thanks to all.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.